This is Tijuana, a city crushed by the narco war.
Sí, es una ciudad muy violenta. Estamos entre las ciudades más violentas del mundo.
They found another body here. That's around 56 bodies in 1 week.
But laws that are meant to make the streets safer have led to tens of thousands being locked up without trial. Now the government's pushing even tougher reforms, leading to furious protests. I'm here to meet a family fighting for justice, for a father trapped behind bars.
Soy inocente, que quiero que se haga justicia en mi caso, que quiero mi libertad.
(11 p.m. and the army's been called in to guard a crime scene. Tijuana is the most dangerous city in Mexico, with around 2,000 killings every year. And within hours of arriving, we find journalists reporting a gruesome story.
Personas que se están conectando a esta transmisión en vivo. Aquí en la ciudad de Tijuana, donde las muertes y la inseguridad prevalecen.
A car has been abandoned at the side of a busy motorway. Inside, a grisly message.
Have they told you what's been happening?
There's 4 bodies in the
Found
car.
in the car.
4 bodies in the cars.
And this is happening regularly?
10, regular.
The bodies are a ruthless warning from one cartel to another as they fight for territory. Mexico's deadly drug war has claimed thousands of casualties. Innocent families often caught in the conflict. There's an early morning wait to cross the border into the United States. Tijuana is just 20 minutes from San Diego, and this is the busiest border crossing in the world. But the frontier has provided an opportunity for Mexico's drug cartels, who compete for control of smuggling routes. The infamous wall, which looms over this landscape, has done little to stop the flow of drugs. Justice here can feel like a gamble. The government says it's combating the cartels by allowing suspects to be locked up before they're convicted, a system called pre-trial detention. But a backlog means 90,000 people are behind bars without trial. Among them, the poorest and most vulnerable, as I've been finding out. I've come to meet Itzel.
How long have you lived here for?
7 años aproximadamente.
Her husband, Juan Antonio, is one of those being held on pre-trial detention. After his brother-in-law accused him of attempted murder, his family's lives turned upside down. Their daughter, Dana, has cerebral palsy, but instead of caring for her, Itzel has to work a full-time job to put food on the table.
Tu papá, ¿quién es? Tu papá.
They can no longer afford to pay for Dana's therapy.
Papá. Papá. Ah, es tu papá. Tus 15 años. Yo, tú y tu papá.
It must be difficult for you looking after the family all alone for all these years while Juan has been in prison.
Es muy difícil. Llevar esto ya 2 años. Ha sido muy pesado. Muy pesado ha sido.
Yeah. You miss your dad, right?
Es que él era la alegría de la casa, porque siempre era que llegaba el viernes, el sábado y decía, ¿a dónde vamos a ir a desayunar mañana?
Remembering happier times.
Muy buenas.
On family holidays.
Es muy trabajador. Tenía 15 años aproximadamente con el autolavado.
But they lost the business when he went inside. The situation has cost their 16-year-old son his education. Rafa has dropped out of school to care for his sister.
Ya tiene 2 años que está mi papá. Son muchos problemas, porque por eso sí me siento bastante triste. Pero sí es más la impotencia, no poder hacer nada. Si no, pues, me siento enojado. Porque pues toda mi vida cambió en un día.
The family are adamant Juan Antonio wasn't there when his brother-in-law was viciously attacked by a group of men. Itzel and the children have been left to cope alone, whilst he awaits a trial date in a maximum security jail. An isolated fortress. This is Alongo prison, where Juan Antonio lives alongside the most hardened criminals and cartel bosses. It's 3 a.m. visiting day. Itzel is sleeping in the car as she waits to see her husband. If you don't arrive here early enough, there's a chance you won't get in. Scrawled on the windscreens, your place number in the queue. Some women tell me they can only afford to visit their husbands every few months.
Pues casi toda la mayoría de mujeres vienen a ver a su esposo, aunque también hay muchas mamás que vienen a ver a sus hijos. Como triste porque ver a todas que todas estamos batallando allá afuera para salir adelante, para venir a verlos.
Waiting for her turn, I meet 66-year-old Margarita. She's from one of Mexico's indigenous communities. Economically and socially marginalized, they're more likely to be sent to prison.
Vengo de visita con mi hijo que ya va a ser 5 años que él está detenido. Él no está sentenciado. Hay mucha gente detenida que son indígenas, no se pueden defender porque no hablan el idioma. Y necesitamos también que tengan ellos un traductor. Yo tengo que ser fuerte para poder ayudar. No puedo, no tengo, pero yo hago el esfuerzo.
It's a huge burden for families struggling to support their loved ones. After a long wait, Itzel is finally allowed to drive in to visit Juan Antonio. We can't go in with her, and we're asked not to film beyond the gate. How many more years will she have to keep making this journey? I've come to meet Juan Antonio's lawyer, Fidel, who's been fighting to free him.
Juan Antonio está en la cárcel sin una prueba. En México es muy fácil que te vayas a la cárcel. Es muy fácil.
Fidel's been dealing with dozens of cases of pre-trial detention, often pro bono. He believes it's become a tool of abuse. Almost 40% of people in prison here haven't been sentenced.
All of these clients are being held without trial.
Sí, este expediente 2016, este expediente 2015, muchos de ellos obedecen no a que sean culpables, sino porque el gobierno, el Estado, busca generar una estadística, busca satisfacer con números.
He's preparing for a crucial hearing. In a few days' time, he'll try to persuade a judge to finally set a trial date and, in the meantime, release Juan Antonio from prison.
So this is what you're hoping will help clear Juan Antonio?
Sí, mira, es la casa de Juan Antonio, o sea, la casa donde ocurrió el evento. Aquí,
This is where his brother-in-law lived.
Así es, exactamente.
Juan Antonio's brother-in-law lived on the same street, but they had a difficult relationship. When his attackers came to the door, they were caught on CCTV.
Este video es muy importante para la defensa porque es la base para demostrar la inocencia de Juan Antonio. Este video es de circuito cerrado de la casa y se tomó exactamente el momento.
So his brother-in-law is coming out.
Así es. Aquí está saliendo el cuñado, 3:34 de la mañana.
We've blurred the faces of the three attackers for legal reasons, but the lawyer says the video proves his client wasn't there. The family believe the brother-in-law owed money to a drug dealer, but he blamed Juan Antonio to avoid recriminations.
He's got a pistol in his hand.
The three men in the video were never charged.
Why do you think these three people didn't go to prison, but your client did?
Lo más probable es que tengan una relación con la policía. Lo más probable es que sean unas personas poderosas del AMPA, de la mafia, y por eso es que no las detienen. Normalmente en México la gente que se va a la cárcel es la gente pobre, la gente que no tiene para pagar una buena defensa.
We wanted to speak to the brother-in-law ourselves to get his side of the story.
The neighbours say that the alleged victim hasn't been seen since blaming Juan Antonio. He's abandoned his car. You can see on the windscreen there's a thick layer of dust and the tyres are completely flat.
I did manage to speak to his ex-partner, Nena, Juan Antonio's sister, who says her brother didn't do it.
This is where the attackers kicked the door in.
Sí, aquí golpearon los tres que llegaron, golpearon aquí la puerta para entrar a hacerle daño a mi expareja, que pues mi hermano es inocente. Él no tuvo nada que ver aquí, para nada. A mí no me llamaron para declarar la policía ni nada.
It's starting to feel like Juan Antonio's case has become just another statistic in the war against drugs and violent crime. Hurtling towards another crime scene.
Vamos a ir a la colonia obrera. Nos han pasado el reporte que hay un vehículo robado. Entonces vamos a ir a checarlo si todavía se encuentra en el lugar.
I join a special forces unit to find out what it's really like on the front line and why they feel powers like pre-trial detention are needed.
Are you looking for a car?
Sí, pero no, parece, lo habían reportado que estaba aquí, pero no, posiblemente ya lo movieron.
None of the officers wanted to show their faces or reveal their names. There's a danger of reprisals. Many colleagues have lost their lives.
Adelante. Llega el reporte, primer incidente de restos humanos en la colonia alemán.
The team are suddenly diverted. At times it feels as if they're always a step behind. There are 4 main cartels battling for territory here, the Sinaloa the most dominant.
They found another body here. That's around 56 bodies in 1 week.
Mexico's ruling party has militarized the police and given them more power. Critics say this has allowed them to act with impunity, leading to accusations of corruption, torture, and even murder.
A lot of people have said to us that they feel that they can't trust the police.
Las personas nos tienen mucha confianza a nosotros como corporación porque somos las que más combatimos la delincuencia de alto impacto.
But some people have suggested that the police torture people or arrest them for no reason.
La verdad, no tengo o no conozco ningún policía que haya hecho eso, y menos en esta corporación. No creo que haya policías que hagan eso, pero pues ahora sí que la gente no sé por qué lo dice.
Despite his assurances, not everybody in this city feels protected by the police. Prima still has her ex-husband's picture on her wall, despite the fact that he falsely accused her of orchestrating his kidnapping. It's a shocking story.
Me casé por la iglesia.
She believes her husband faked his own kidnapping to take their property and blamed her. But instead of investigating him, she claims the security services tortured a confession out of her.
That's your daughter. It's beautiful.
Her daughter was just 13 when Prima was sent to prison.
Ok, aquí tengo mis documentos. Y aquí está mi hoja de libertad.
So this is this is the certificate you got to say that you're finally free after 10 years. Wow.
After 2 years on pre-trial detention, Prima was convicted. It took another 8 years to overturn, after a psychiatrist helped reveal details of the torture she says she suffered.
Entonces, y me dice uno, pues, quítese la ropa, quítese la blusa, me dijo. Y yo, no, pues dije, no le contestaba, yo ya no contestaba porque eran 3 hombres ahí en un cuartito, era un cuartito ahí. Y con miedo, con vergüenza, me quité la blusa y la puse así. Y ahí me hicieron todo lo que quisieron ellos hacerme. Y estuve con eso mucho tiempo, muchos años. Yo no me podía bañar sin que una compañera mía me estuviera cuidando, porque en cuanto yo escuchaba voces de guardias, de policías, yo pensaba que me iban a hacer lo mismo.
It was a horrific ordeal, and those she says are responsible are still serving in the force, having never been punished.
Entonces, se me hace muy injusto que la justicia, hasta ahorita, siga siendo la misma. Si no tienen familia, si no tienen dinero, pues ahí no vales nada.
Unlikely to see justice, Prima's now trying to rebuild her life with her daughter. Driving through the desert, we're on our way back to El Hongo, hoping to meet Juan Antonio and to get a glimpse of life inside the prison.
We've been promised access, so we're hoping we'll get to speak to him.
As I enter, I join a group of American nuns, including Sister Viola from San Diego. They regularly cross the border to bring prisoners food and other essentials. The nuns are allowed to step in where families can't, providing solace to those enduring years, decades even, behind bars.
En el nombre del Padre, del Hijo, del Espíritu Santo. Amén.
Under constant watch, we're granted a brief conversation with a man sentenced to 30 years for drug offences. The nuns are his only connection now to the outside world.
Cuando ellas vienen siento ese apoyo que no pude tener de mi familia, de mis seres queridos.
Without your family to provide the basic things for you, how difficult is it?
Pues sinceramente bastante porque para nosotros nuestro mayor apoyo es a nuestra familia. Es que nos dan la fuerza, nos dan las ganas de seguir adelante. Y el que no venga, pues sí es doloroso, muy doloroso.
The director gave me a tour of selected parts of the prison. Some families have told us of harsh conditions and overcrowded cells, but they weren't included on our tour.
Todos tenemos una población de 1,696 privados. Tenemos lo que es el área de actividades culturales, deportivas.
The government plans to lengthen the list of offences that qualify for pre-trial detention, which could mean more prisoners in places like this.
When they change the law to increase the categories of pre-trial detention, will your prisons be able to cope?
Pues tratamos de que pues lleven a cabo todas sus actividades, pero tratamos de incumplir lo más que se pueda con los programas de reinserción, ¿no? ¿Para qué? Para que puedan estar saliendo, pues y no se acumule tanta persona privada de libertad al interior del centro.
We wanted to interview a specific prisoner whose story we've been following, Juan Antonio, but we're told we can't see him. Why is that?
No está conmigo. Conmigo no, ya lo chequé en el sistema y no lo tengo aquí conmigo.
¿Juan Antonio no está aquí?
No.
Juan Antonio is being held in a separate section of El Hongo.
So we spent the morning in the prison. They showed us around, but they wouldn't let us speak to Juan Antonio, and they've now told us that we won't get access into the prison again. That's it.
It's the day Itzel has been waiting for months. The day of the online court hearing, which could finally see her husband freed. Fidel and his team are going to argue that Juan Antonio should be released until a date is set.
Buenos días.
Juan, ¿me escuchas?
Sí, le escucho.
Mira, el día de hoy tenemos tu audiencia de revisión de medida cautelar.
Necesito que si la juez te dice que si tú quieres decir algo, ¿qué le vas a decir entonces?
Decir inocente que quiero que se haga justicia en mi caso, que quiero mi libertad.
Aquí estoy contigo, estoy escuchando. Que vas a estar libre.
El 25 de septiembre del 2024, el Tribunal de Enjuiciamiento para llevar a cabo la audiencia de revisión contra Juan Antonio González Arias, alias El Tony.
Nuestro representado tendrá derecho a ser juzgado dentro de un plazo razonable. Ya estamos hablando de 2 años, su señoría.
This is the first time Juan Antonio has been allowed to address the court.
Con todo respeto, señora, pues yo soy una persona de valores, una persona que me enseñaron a trabajar, a ganarme dinero, a ser una persona respetuosa, trabajadora. Tengo familia, tengo hijos. Toda mi vida ha sido para ellos. Yo simplemente quiero que se haga justicia.
His lawyer argues that the region's human rights courts, which Mexico is signed up to, condemns the practice of pre-trial detention.
Sin embargo, la prisión preventiva como medida cautelar no es una sanción anticipada, es una manera de asegurar que usted esté presente para la consecución del procedimiento penal que...
The judge acknowledges there are just 22 judges to process 600 cases waiting for trial, a backlog that could take months, even years to clear. But she rules against his release.
El sentido de la prisión preventiva y se mantiene pues impuesta de manera oficiosa como...
It's devastating for Itzel and Juan Antonio.
Juan Antonio.
Te amo, mi amor. Gracias por estar conmigo. Gracias.
Siempre voy a estar contigo, mi amor.
Despite concerns about the lack of resources, the government's pushing ahead with changes to pre-trial detention. This and other justice reforms have triggered protests against the ruling Morena party. And in Mexico City, demonstrators broke into the Senate trying to stop the reforms. When we visit, the building's still in lockdown, with police protecting the entrance. I'm here to meet the politician behind the government's plan to expand pre-trial detention.
We have letters from the 32 governors of the states that compose Mexico, and they asked to the Supreme Court to sustain the pretrial detention, and they look to this policy as useful for granting security for all Mexicans.
He told me that the new reforms will limit pre-trial detention to 1 year.
We listened in on a hearing, and the judge there admitted that there just aren't enough judges to deal with all of these cases. So how will you clear it all in 1 year?
Hay suficientes jueces. There are enough judges. They are not committed.
You think it's the judges and not the system? You think judges are not committed to the job?
Are not committed.
Really?
Yes.
There are just so many cases to deal with. But you're saying they're lazy, they're not working enough?
Of course.
With a huge backlog of cases and reports of endemic corruption, many believe these reforms are unlikely to bring justice to those already stuck in the system. For Itzel, the fight to release Juan Antonio goes on. A new life has entered the family now, his grandson, whom he's never met.
Vuelvo a salir, ma.
Va a volver, ¿verdad?
Va a volver.
Por no poder hacer más. No hay nada más que usted pueda hacer más que esperar la fecha de juicio. No hay justicia en México.